Laurie Garrett, author of The Coming Plague, right, from a long time ago, who has not done a brilliant job throughout this, quote tweets, "The new silent majority, the fully vaxxed," of an Atlantic article, which, let's see, I didn't pull it up for the silent, this is an Atlantic article published a few days ago, "The silent vaccinated impatient majority. As patience with the pandemic wanes, leaders in widely vaccinated democracies are deploying a new political strategy." And it proceeds to explain how those who are vaccinated are just fed up with those of us who aren't, and it's our fault.
Well,
they're continuing the pandemic of the unvaccinated, even now. I mean, this is, what is it, the 21st, the 22nd? I don't even know. It's like 4 or 5 days ago. Even now.
Yeah.
Even now.
Well, but
when the efficacy of these things is so clearly through the floor.
Right.
And you're going to get on your high horse about being impatient with those of us who resisted your crap treatment?
Well, it's dog whistle is an overused term, but it's a dog whistle for people who were gullible enough to fall for that line in the first place. And the point is, I at least have some sympathy for people who didn't know what to do, didn't know who to listen to, and said, well, these people who have all of the things that are supposed to indicate that they are scientifically credible are telling me that they've looked at the evidence, they've looked at the safety, they've looked at the efficacy, and that I should get this thing, right?
Yeah, but are you sympathetic to people who are still now, this week, saying, well, I did everything right, and I'm just really fed up with the people who didn't because it's their fault?
Look, I'm sympathetic with anybody who didn't have the tools to make sense of it.
That's
I am
different.
not sympathetic with people who did have the tools and decided not to use them.
Well, but I guess, and this again, it's really hard to discriminate between can't and won't. But part of what I am wrestling with at the moment is the reveal that so many people among the so-called intelligentsia, the chattering classes of the coasts, either cannot or will not engage in what, for us, as people who think scientifically every day of our lives, is second nature. Doing analysis and just basic hypothesis generation and an attempt to look into the actual data insofar as it's been available. There's been almost none of that. Is it a can't or a won't? I don't know.
Well, but I mean, this went down through the careful use of incentives.
Yeah.
Right? And the whole point, the whole reason that the experience was from our side what it was, had to do with the fact that what was really being said to people is, look at them, there but for the grace of God go you. Now, the way that you stay out of that position is you don't explore in this way. So to the extent that somebody put very frightening stuff in the path of those who might otherwise have been open to an analysis, I don't respect not thinking because somebody is trying to scare you away from thinking, but I understand it.
Right.
Right. And depending upon who you are, a lot of people were isolated. They did not know
That's true.
who was making sense. And, it's not simple.
Yep.
Right.
So, okay, I've taken the Atlantic to task a lot over the last year or two, in part because I'm super disappointed in it, because it was one of my first literary loves, and I was treated well by it early on. And this, Zachary, if you would show this is the article I just showed, The Silent Vaccinated Impatient Majority. Well, I'm old enough to remember when the Atlantic was publishing articles like this. 2010. Did Pfizer bribe its way out of criminal charges in Nigeria? WikiLeaks cables shed new light into one of Big Pharma's darkest hours. And I'm just going to read...
What was the date on that?
2010. Just read the first paragraph here. On day 12 of WikiLeaks' release of U.S. State Department cables, the daily drip, drip, drip of diplomatic secrets implicated the pharmaceutical industry. The company was Pfizer, the country was Nigeria, and the context was the long-simmering, still bitter aftermath of the drug giant's quick and dirty 1996 trials of an experimental antibiotic for children during a devastating meningitis outbreak. a truly chilling cautionary tale of industry-funded clinical trials in the developing world. This event is recalled in the West mainly as the inspiration for John le Carré's evil pharma thriller, The Constant Gardener. So, The Constant Gardener is one of the two films that we watched this week. Zach, if I may have my screen back, thank you. Which is extraordinary and also won all sorts of awards for its sort of artistic and narrative skill. It's a 2005 film based on the 2001 John le Carré novel of the same name. And interestingly, so that Atlantic article suggests that it is understood, and there is a lot of stuff that suggests that le Carré really was loosely basing this on what happened with Pfizer in Nigeria. But at the end of the film, there is a quote from le Carré that reads, "Nobody in this story, and no outfit or corporation, thank God, is based upon an actual person or outfit in the real world. But I can tell you this. As my journey through the pharmaceutical jungle progressed, I came to realize that, by comparison with the reality, my story was as tame as a holiday postcard." I recommend this movie. I recommend this movie highly. And I also recommend the movie we watched last night, which we had seen before, but we watched with our boys for the first time, which is Dallas Buyers Club, a 2013 movie, so-called biographical drama, based on the real-life story of Ron Woodruff. Story takes place in the mid to late 1980s during the AIDS crisis. And at the end of the movie, the quote there, interesting, about both of these movies, there are quotes at the end that you don't typically see the likes of at the end of movies. At the end of this movie, we have "AIDS is not over. Access to treatment could save many more lives." And Dallas Buyers Club doesn't have anything to do with Africa, but there's a common theme here in terms of what kind of medical capers have actually happened in Africa and who is actually being harmed and what the people who are doing the harm sound like when they talk about what they're doing there. And it's almost always exactly the opposite of what they're actually doing.
I think this is a piece of the puzzle here that we are never going to have an easy time conveying, which is that there is a process in normal business. There is a positive feedback, right? Where I've used the example of, if you're going to design the interior of a car, you're going to make decisions that are going to result in certain people dying, right? Because if you were to design a car in which you made every decision such that, it had no downsides, the car would be impossibly expensive and impossibly gas guzzling. And so, there are trade-offs. But the point is, once you are in the world of trade-offs, where the point is your decisions have the result in somebody's death here and there, and you start getting comfortable with that as part of the process, there's no end to it. And so pharmaceutical companies run trials. These trials involve people dying from medications because you need to know how safe the thing is. And obviously a medication could be wonderfully valuable and have a certain amount of harm in the form of people dying who have particular predispositions or whatever, right? So the point is there's a utilitarian metric by which you get an allowance for doing terrible things to people. And the point is, once you get comfortable with that, as these films obviously reveal, one in the case of an African trial and the other in the case of the absurd use of AZT earlier in the AIDS
and the refusal of FDA to allow any other kinds of treatment.
Right, a familiar pattern. But the point is, once pharma or any other industry gets used to the carnage that results from business as usual, the point is then it becomes a question of scale.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what we saw here, is a brand new scale of something that actually isn't remarkable for pharma. It happens all the time. It just, this time it involved all of us.
Yeah, this went full global. Typically, they have restricted themselves to a continent.
Right, but my point is, all of the things that people are having a hard time believing actually could possibly have happened. I mean, what protected the pharma effort here was that it was impossible to believe that people would do this to other humans. And the
what
point
kind
is,
of lie was it?
Right.
Was it noble?
What it was business as usual at a scale that has never been seen before, at an absolutely unprecedented scale, right? Mm-hmm. And that is actually a story that we need to wrap our minds around, right? That this is happening all the time with other diseases and other drugs, and, often far enough out of your view that it seems very, very remote, right? But anyway, the scale caught us off guard, and hopefully it's woken us up.